Jasmine King never expected that wearing a hoodie would turn her own private jet into a crime scene. Standing on the scorching tarmac of Teterboro Airport, looking up at the $50 million Gulfstream G700 her father had just purchased, she wasn't greeted with champagne or a warm towel. She was met with a sneer. The flight attendant didn't just block the door, she threatened to call the police on the trespassing thug daring to approach the stairs. Jasmine stayed silent, letting the crew dig their own graves. But when the owner's limousine finally pulled up, the silence broke, and the humiliation that followed would destroy careers forever. The heat rising off the tarmac at Teterboro Airport was enough to distort the air, making the sleek, white fuselage of the Gulfstream G700 shimmer like a mirage. It was a magnificent machine, a marvel of modern aviation engineering, with its signature oval windows and Rolls-Royce Pearl 700 engines that promised a ride smoother than silk. It sat parked in front of the private FBO, fixed base operator, terminal, isolated from the chaos of commercial travel, waiting for its primary passengers. Inside the cabin, the air was conditioned to a crisp 68 degrees. Patricia, the chief flight attendant for Apex Charter Solutions, adjusted the lapel of her navy blue blazer. She caught her reflection in the polished walnut veneer of the galley cabinets. Perfect. Every hair was sprayed into an immovable helmet of blonde precision. Her lipstick was a sharp, aggressive shade of crimson. She prided herself on maintaining the highest standards of elite aviation. To Patricia, the private jet industry wasn't just about transport. It was about gatekeeping. It was about ensuring that the riffraff of the world remained separated from the quality people. "Captain Miller," Patricia called out, her voice pitching slightly to be heard over the hum of the auxiliary power unit. "The catering has arrived. The filet mignon looks decent, though the garnish is a bit wilted. I'll have to fix it myself." Captain Miller, a thick-set man with a complexion that suggested high blood pressure and a love for scotch, leaned out of the cockpit. He adjusted his epaulets. "Good. The client is Tobias King. Big tech money. Or real estate. I don't know. One of those billionaires who expects the world to stop spinning when he snaps his fingers. Let's make sure everything is tight. I want this contract to stick. No mistakes." "I never make mistakes," Patricia scoffed, smoothing a napkin on a side table. Outside, a solitary figure walked across the asphalt. Jasmine King, 19 years old, adjusted her noise-cancelling headphones. She wore a faded, oversized grey hoodie that swallowed her slender frame, ripped denim jeans, and a pair of beat-up canvas sneakers. A backpack hung loosely over one shoulder. She looked less like the heiress to a multinational logistics and software empire and more like a college student heading to a library study session. Jasmine checked her phone. Her father, Tobias, had texted, "Running 15 mins late. Bored without me. Get comfortable. Love, Dad." She sighed, shoving the phone into her back pocket. She hated flying, even private. The recycled air always gave her a headache. But she was heading back to Stanford for the fall semester, and her father insisted on the new toy, as he called it. He wanted to show off the G700. She approached the air stairs, the metal steps lowered and inviting. She could see the flight attendant inside, bustling about. Jasmine didn't expect a red carpet, but she expected basic recognition. Her name was on the manifest, after all. As her sneaker hit the first step of the stairs, a shadow fell over her. Patricia appeared in the doorway like a gargoyle guarding a cathedral. Her eyes, heavily lined with mascara, swept over Jasmine from head to toe, lingering with obvious disdain on the ripped jeans and the messy bun of curly dark hair. "Stop right there," Patricia barked. It wasn't a question, it was a command used for dogs. Jasmine paused, pulling one side of her headphones back. "Excuse me." "I said stop," Patricia said, stepping onto the top platform of the stairs to physically block the entrance. She crossed her arms, her manicured nails digging into the fabric of her expensive uniform. Deliveries go to the service entrance at the back of the FBO, not the aircraft, and certainly not up the main stairs. Did you not read the signs? Jasmine blinked, confused. I'm not a delivery driver. Oh, I see. Patricia's lip curled. Cleaning crew, then. You're early, and you're out of uniform. Apex has a strict dress code for sanitation staff. We don't allow. She gestured vaguely at Jasmine's attire, whatever this is, to touch the upholstery. I'm not cleaning crew, Jasmine said, her voice calm but tightening. I'm a passenger. Patricia let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. It was a sound devoid of humor, designed solely to belittle. She turned her head slightly back toward the cockpit. Captain, you might want to come back here. We have a situation. Jasmine took a breath, trying to keep her temper in check. Her father had taught her that anger was a tool, not a crutch. Losing it now would only give this woman ammunition. My name is Jasmine. I'm on the manifest. If you just check your iPad, I don't need to check anything to know you don't belong on a $60 million aircraft, Patricia interrupted, her voice dripping with venom. This is a private charter for Mr. Tobias King. Do you know who that is? He is a man of significant importance. He does not share his cabin with stowaways, fans, or lost teenagers looking for a selfie. I know who Tobias King is, Jasmine said, her hand gripping the strap of her backpack tighter. I don't care if he's your favorite TikTok star, Patricia snapped, cutting her off. Get off the stairs, now, before I call security and have you dragged off the tarmac for trespassing on federal property. The heat of the engine exhaust was nothing compared to the heat rising in Jasmine's chest. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. This was something else. She had seen this look before, in high-end boutiques where clerks followed her, but ignored her white friends, in restaurants where the hostess asked if she was picking up a takeout order when she had a reservation. It was the look that said, "You are not one of us." You're making a mistake, Jasmine said quietly. The only mistake was leaving the gate unlocked, Patricia hissed. Captain Miller emerged from the cockpit, wiping his hands on a rag. He was a large man who filled the narrow entryway, imposing and solid. He looked at Patricia, then down at Jasmine, standing on the second step. What's the problem, Patricia? Miller asked, his voice a low rumble. We have a security breach, Captain, Patricia said, pointing an accusatory finger at Jasmine. This individual is attempting to force her way on board. She claims she's a passenger. Miller's eyes narrowed behind his aviator sunglasses. He looked at Jasmine, assessing her. He saw the hoodie. He saw the dark skin. He saw the lack of designer luggage. He made his decision in a split second, fueled by years of bias disguised as instinct. Miss, Miller said, his tone patronizingly slow, as if speaking to a child or someone who didn't understand English. You need to step back down to the tarmac. This is a restricted area. I'm trying to tell her, Jasmine said, looking directly at the pilot. My name is Jasmine King. I am flying to Palo Alto today. My father is Tobias King. He is running 15 minutes late and told me to board. Miller exchanged a look with Patricia. Patricia rolled her eyes so hard it looked painful. Likely story, Patricia muttered. Did you hear that, Captain? Jasmine King. Because billionaires typically let their daughters wander around secure airfields looking like they just rolled out of a dumpster. Miller stepped forward, his body language aggressive. Listen to me. I have the manifest right here in my head. Mr. King is the principal passenger. He did not mention a Jasmine. He booked the flight for himself. He booked it for us, Jasmine corrected. Check the digital manifest, the updated one sent by his assistant this morning. I don't have time to chase down imaginary updates, Miller snapped. We have a departure slot to hit. Look, kid, I don't know how you got past the FBO desk. Maybe you hopped a fence. Maybe you know someone in catering. But you are not getting on this plane. This is a Gulf Stream, not a Greyhound bus. You're refusing me entry? Jasmine asked, pulling her phone out again. I'm going to call him. Put the phone away, Patricia shrieked, stepping down one step so she was looming directly over Jasmine. No pictures, no calls. This is a violation of privacy. Patricia reached out and slapped Jasmine's hand. The phone didn't fall, but the contact was shocking. Jasmine recoiled, her eyes widening. You just touched me, Jasmine said, her voice dropping an octave. You do not touch a passenger. You are not a passenger, Patricia screamed, losing her veneer of professional cool entirely. You are a trespasser. You are a security threat. Captain, call the airfield police. I want her arrested. I want her charged with attempted hijacking. Hijacking? Jasmine scoffed, incredulous. I have a backpack full of textbooks and a bag of pretzels. Get down, Miller roared, pointing to the ground. Get off the stairs immediately or I will physically remove you myself. Jasmine looked at the two of them, the captain, red-faced and blustering, and the flight attendant, smug and trembling with self-righteous rage. She realized there was no reasoning with them. Logic had left the building the moment they saw her face. Slowly, deliberately, Jasmine stepped backward. 1 step, 2 steps, until her sneakers were back on the hot asphalt. Good, Miller grunted, adjusting his belt. Now stay right there. Don't move an inch. Patricia, call the tower. Tell them to send security. We have a containment situation. On it, Captain, Patricia said, pulling out her own phone with a triumphant smirk. She looked down at Jasmine from the safety of the cabin door. You picked the wrong plane to mess with, sweetheart. By the time the police are done with you, you'll be lucky if you can get a job scrubbing toilets at the bus station. Jasmine didn't argue. She didn't scream. She simply stood there on the burning tarmac, the heat radiating through the soles of her shoes. She unlocked her phone. She didn't call the police. She didn't call her lawyer. She opened the contact labeled Dad. She pressed call. Up in the cabin doorway, Patricia was loudly recounting a fabricated version of events to whoever was on the other end of the line. Yes, aggressive behavior. Refused to identify herself. Possible weapon in the backpack. Yes, we are holding her at bay. Jasmine watched her, a cold calm settling over her. She waited for her father to pick up. Hey, kiddo. Tobias's voice boomed through the phone, sounding cheerful. I'm just pulling up to the gate. You on board yet? How's the AC? Dad, Jasmine said, her voice steady, but loud enough for Miller to hear from the top of the stairs. I'm not on board. I'm on the tarmac. What? Tobias asked. Why? Is there a maintenance issue? No, Jasmine said, locking eyes with Miller, who was now frowning, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. The crew won't let me on. The flight attendant hit my hand, and the captain is currently calling the police to have me arrested for hijacking. There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was a terrifying silence, the kind of silence that precedes a tsunami. Stay right there, Jasmine, Tobias said, his voice completely changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by a tone of steel and ice. I see the plane. I'm 30 seconds away. The line clicked dead. Jasmine lowered the phone. She looked up at Miller. He's coming? Miller scoffed, though he looked nervously toward the FBO terminal gates. Who's coming? Your ride to the precinct? No, Jasmine said, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips. The owner. At that moment, the black iron gates of the private terminal swung open. A fleet of 3 black Cadillac Escalades rolled onto the tarmac, engines roaring. They didn't drive tentatively. They drove in a formation that screamed power, heading straight for the Gulfstream G700. Patricia stopped talking on her phone. She lowered it slowly. "Captain, is that—" "That's Mr. King," Miller said, straightening his tie, suddenly desperate to look professional. "Okay, look sharp. We'll explain the situation to him. We protected his asset. He'll thank us. He'll see we kept the riffraff away." Miller was trying to convince himself as much as Patricia. But as the lead Escalade screeched to a halt just 10 feet from where Jasmine stood, and the back door flew open before the car had even fully stopped, the knot in his stomach tightened. Because the man who stepped out didn't look like a man coming to thank his staff. He looked like a man coming to war. The silence that followed the arrival of the motorcade was heavier than the humid New Jersey air. The lead Cadillac Escalade sat idling, its black paint gleaming like oil. The driver, a mountain of a man named Grant, stepped out first, scanning the perimeter with practiced professional paranoia. He opened the rear passenger door. Tobias King emerged. He was a man who commanded gravity. Standing 6'2", he wore a bespoke charcoal suit that likely cost more than Captain Miller's annual salary. His tie was loosened slightly, suggesting a long day of high-stakes negotiations, but his posture was rigid. He had the same dark, intelligent eyes as Jasmine, but where hers were currently filled with exhaustion, his were burning with a cold, controlled fury. Captain Miller, still standing halfway down the air stairs, adjusted his hat. He forced a smile, misreading the room entirely. In his mind, the billionaire had arrived to secure the asset. Miller jogged down the last few steps to the tarmac, extending a hand. "Mr. King," Miller said, his voice booming with false confidence. "Thank goodness you're here. We've had a situation with a local trespasser, but we've managed to contain it. Patricia is on the line with airfield security right now. We didn't want to worry you, but—" Tobias didn't even look at him. He didn't break stride. He walked right past Miller's extended hand, as if the pilot were a ghost. Miller's hand was left hanging in the air, shaking slightly. Tobias walked straight to Jasmine. She was still standing where she had retreated, her arms crossed over her chest, the oversized grey hoodie making her look small against the backdrop of the massive jet. "You okay?" Tobias asked, his voice dropping to a gentle rumble that only she could hear. He placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing it firmly. "I'm fine, Dad," Jasmine said, letting out a long breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Just tired." "Did they hurt you?" Tobias asked, scanning her face. "You said on the phone she hit you." "She slapped my hand," Jasmine said, nodding toward the top of the stairs where Patricia was now frozen, her phone still pressed to her ear, her face draining of color. "And he threatened to physically throw me off the stairs." Tobias nodded slowly. He turned around. The transformation was terrifying. The gentle father vanished. The titan of industry returned. He looked at Captain Miller, who was now sweating profusely, the realization slowly dawning on him like a creeping sickness. "Captain," Tobias said. It wasn't a greeting. It was an indictment. "Mr. King," Miller stammered, taking a step back. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. This young woman, she didn't identify herself properly. She was wearing— look at her attire. We have strict protocols for your safety. We thought she was a threat." "A threat?" Tobias repeated, his voice dangerously low. He gestured to Jasmine. "My daughter, Jasmine King, a 19-year-old sophomore at Stanford University. You thought she was a threat? Your daughter?" Miller's voice cracked. He looked from Tobias to Jasmine, his eyes bulging. The resemblance was undeniable now that they stood side by side, the same nose, the same eyes. The only difference was the clothes, and Miller realized, with a sinking gut, that he had judged an entire human being's worth based on a $20 hoodie. I didn't know, Miller whispered. You didn't know, Tobias mocked, stepping closer. Or you didn't care to check. You didn't check the manifest I sent this morning? We were busy with pre-flight checks, Miller lied, his eyes darting around. Patricia! Tobias barked, looking up the stairs. Patricia flinched. She slowly lowered the phone, ending the call with security. She walked down the stairs, her legs trembling in her high heels. She stopped 3 steps from the bottom, unable to bring herself to stand on the same level as the man who signed her paychecks. Mr. King, Patricia said, her voice a breathless squeak. Sir, She refused to listen. She was aggressive. She came up the stairs without permission. We were just protecting the aircraft. You have to understand, in this day and age, you can't be too careful with strangers. Strangers, Tobias chewed on the word. Tell me, Patricia, if she had been white and wearing a tennis skirt, would she have been a stranger? Or would she have been a guest? The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She had no answer. Because they all knew the answer. I treat everyone with respect, Patricia lied, her face flushing a deep, blotchy red. You slapped her, Tobias said. It was a statement of fact. I reached for her phone, Patricia stammered. It was a reflex. She was filming. It's against policy. It's against policy to assault a passenger, Tobias roared, his voice finally breaking its calm containment. The sound echoed off the fuselage of the G700. It is against policy to humiliate a child. Do you have any idea who you are dealing with? We're sorry, Miller interjected, stepping in front of Patricia, trying to salvage the unsalvageable. Mr. King, please. It was a mistake. We apologize to Miss King. Deeply. We'll make it up to her. We'll give her the best service on the way to Palo Alto. Champagne, caviar, whatever she wants. Jasmine looked at Miller, her expression flat. I don't drink, and I'm allergic to caviar. See? Miller gave a nervous, hysterical laugh. We'll learn. We'll learn her preferences. Just, let's get on board. We have a slot. We don't want to miss our departure window. Tobias looked at the jet. Then he looked at his daughter. Then he looked at the crew. You think you're flying this plane? Tobias asked, a dark smile playing on his lips. You think you're going to lock yourself in a metal tube with my daughter for 6 hours after you just treated her like a criminal? Tobias reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a phone. But he didn't call the police. He called someone much more dangerous for people like Miller and Patricia. He called the CEO of Apex Charter Solutions. Put it on speaker, Tobias said to the air, holding the phone out. The phone rang twice before it was picked up. Tobias, good afternoon. I assume you're seeing the new G700. Beautiful bird, isn't she? The voice was smooth, corporate. Robert Vance, the head of the charter company. Robert, Tobias said, his eyes never leaving Patricia's terrified face. The plane is fine. The staff, however, is defective. Defective? Robert's tone shifted instantly to concern. What do you mean? Captain Miller is one of our most senior pilots. Patricia is a chief stewardess. They just refused my daughter entry to the aircraft, Tobias said clearly. They physically blocked her. Patricia struck her hand. Captain Miller threatened to have her arrested by the tarmac police. They called her a thug. What? Robert gasped on the other end. Tobias, are you serious? I am standing on the tarmac right now, Tobias said. My daughter is in tears. Jasmine wasn't in tears. She was actually looking quite bored, but she understood her father was engaging in theatre for effect, so she sniffled loudly for good measure. That is unacceptable," Robert stammered. "Let me speak to Miller." Tobias shoved the phone into Miller's chest. Miller grabbed it with shaking hands. "Mr. Vance," Miller said, his voice weak. "Is it true?" Robert's voice was like a whip crack over the speakerphone. "Did you bar Jasmine King from the flight?" "Sir, we didn't know it was her," Miller pleaded. "She had no ID displayed. She was wearing a hoodie. We followed standard security." "Standard security involves checking the manifest," Robert shouted. "I personally emailed you the update at 8 a.m. Did you not read the briefing?" Miller went silent. He hadn't read it. He had been too busy complaining about the catering garnish with Patricia. "And did you threaten a passenger?" Robert pressed. I threatened a trespasser," Miller tried to distinguish. "You threatened my client's daughter," Robert screamed. "Do you know how much business Mr. King brings us? This contract alone is worth $3 million a year." Miller looked at Tobias. The billionaire was checking his watch, looking unimpressed. "Give the phone back to Mr. King," Robert ordered. Miller handed the phone back to Tobias, like it was a live grenade. "I'm here, Robert," Tobias said calmly. "Tobias, I am horrified," Robert said. "I will pull them off the rotation immediately. I'll send a replacement crew. Give me 45 minutes. I have a standby team at Newark." "No," Tobias said. "I don't want a replacement crew from Apex." "Tobias, please, I'm cancelling the contract, Robert. Effective immediately. You can take your G700 and fly it back to the hangar. I'm not paying for the empty leg." "Tobias, that's a breach of—" "Sue me," Tobias said. "I have better lawyers. And Robert, if I see Miller or Patricia working on any charter I fly in the future, NetJets, Vista, Wheels Up, I will cancel those contracts too. I will make it my personal mission to ensure everyone in the Fortune 500 knows exactly why I left Apex." "Understood," Robert said, his voice defeated. "I'll handle it." The call ended. Tobias pocketed the phone. He looked at the crew. "You heard the man. Get your bags. Get off the plane." Patricia looked like she was going to faint. "But, sir, we're in New Jersey. My car is at our base in White Plains." "That sounds like a you problem," Tobias said. "You can walk, or maybe call a cab, but you aren't riding on my dime." "This is illegal," Patricia shrieked, the tears finally coming, hot and angry. "You can't just strand us here. We have rights, union rights." "You forfeited your rights to courtesy when you profiled my daughter," Tobias said, his voice hard as granite. "Now get your personal items. You have 5 minutes before I have Grant remove you." Grant, the bodyguard, cracked his knuckles. It was a subtle sound, but effective. Patricia and Miller scrambled up the stairs. The humiliation was total. They had to rush into the cabin, grab their flight bags, and endure the walk of shame back down the stairs, passing Jasmine and Tobias. As Patricia passed Jasmine, she stopped for a split second. The venom was still there, lurking under the fear. "You planned this," Patricia whispered, low enough that Tobias wouldn't hear. "You little brat, you dressed like that on purpose." Jasmine looked her in the eye. For the first time, she smiled. It was a bright, terrifying smile. "I dressed for comfort, Patricia," Jasmine said. "You dressed for a job you just lost." Patricia gasped, clutching her bag, and hurried away, her heels clacking unevenly on the asphalt. Once they were gone, retreating toward the terminal gate where they would have to explain to security why they were leaving without the plane, silence returned to the tarmac. Tobias let out a sigh and adjusted his cufflinks. He looked at the massive, empty jet. "Well," Tobias said. "That was satisfying. But now we have a problem." "What?" Jasmine asked. We have no pilots, and I really need to get to that meeting in Palo Alto. Jasmine looked at the G700. She looked at the open door. A thought crossed her mind. A memory from the last summer break, something her father didn't know about yet. Actually, Jasmine said, we might not be totally stuck. Tobias raised an eyebrow. Unless you have a pilot's license hidden in that hoodie, we're stuck. Jasmine bit her lip. She walked over to her backpack, which was still sitting on the tarmac, where she'd dropped it during the confrontation. She unzipped the front pocket and pulled out a small, leather-bound logbook. I didn't want to tell you until I passed my check ride for the multi-engine rating, Jasmine said sheepishly, but I spent the summer in Florida. Tobias took the logbook. He flipped it open. His eyes widened. You're type-rated. Tobias looked at her, stunned. On a Gulf Stream? No, Jasmine laughed. God, no, that's way too big. I'm rated on a Cessna Citation, smaller jets. Well, that doesn't help us fly this beast, Tobias said, gesturing to the G700. No, Jasmine agreed. But I know who can. Remember Uncle Marcus, the one you fired 3 years ago for arguing with you about the merger? Tobias grimaced. Don't remind me. He's probably flying cargo in Alaska. Actually, Jasmine said, pulling up a contact on her phone. He's chief pilot for a private family in Teterboro, and he owes me a favor because I helped him set up his iPad last Christmas. Tobias laughed, a deep, belly laugh that released the tension of the last hour. Call him. If he can fly us, he's hired. Double whatever he's making now. Jasmine dialed, but as she put the phone to her ear, she noticed something. The Escalade drivers were looking back toward the terminal. Patricia and Miller weren't leaving. They were standing by the gate, talking to a police officer, and they were pointing back at Jasmine. Dad, Jasmine said, lowering the phone. They aren't done yet. Tobias turned. He saw the police cruiser lights flash on. Unbelievable, Tobias muttered. They're trying to flip it. The police car rolled onto the tarmac, heading straight for them. Patricia was in the back seat. The Port Authority police cruiser came to a halt at a sharp angle, effectively blocking the path of Tobias's Escalade. The red and blue lights reflected dizzyingly off the polished white hull of the Gulf Stream, creating a chaotic strobe effect against the darkening evening sky. Officer Higgins, a veteran of the airfield patrol with a thick grey mustache and a weary expression, stepped out of the vehicle. He adjusted his utility belt, his hand resting instinctively near his holster. He didn't draw his weapon, but his posture was one of high alert. From the back seat of the cruiser, Patricia emerged. She had somehow managed to make herself look disheveled in the 2 minutes she had been inside the car. Her blazer was buttoned wrong, and she was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Captain Miller stood beside the cruiser, looking pale and nauseous, clearly dragged into this final, desperate gambit by his chief flight attendant. "Step away from the vehicle," Officer Higgins commanded, his voice amplified by the open space of the tarmac. He pointed toward Tobias and Jasmine. "Hands where I can see them." Tobias King didn't raise his hands. He simply unbuttoned his suit jacket and stood with his feet shoulder-width apart, a monolith of calm amidst the storm. "Officer, I am Tobias King. This is my aircraft, and this is my daughter." "I don't care who you are right now, sir," Higgins said, walking briskly toward them. "I have a complainant who states that she was physically assaulted and threatened by 2 individuals matching your description." "Assaulted?" Jasmine's jaw dropped. She looked at Patricia, who was standing behind the safety of the police car door, pointing a shaking finger at Jasmine. "That's her!" Patricia cried out, her voice cracking with a theatrical sob. "The girl in the hoodie. She lunged at me. She tried to push me down the air stairs when I told her she couldn't board. And that man, he threatened to have his bodyguard beat us if we didn't leave the premises immediately." It was a lie so bold, so completely inverted from the truth, that for a moment Tobias was speechless. He had dealt with corporate espionage, hostile takeovers, and contract breaches, but the sheer, unadulterated audacity of this woman was something new. "Officer," Tobias said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "This is a fabrication. I fired this crew 10 minutes ago for misconduct. They are retaliating." "He's lying!" Patricia shrieked. "He's trying to cover up for his daughter. She's out of control. Look at her. Does she look like she belongs here? She smells like marijuana, officer. I smelled it on her breath when she got in my face." Jasmine stepped forward, outraged. "I have never smoked a day in my life. I'm a track athlete." "Back up!" Higgins barked, stepping between Jasmine and Patricia. He looked at Jasmine, his eyes narrowing, as he took in her ripped jeans and hoodie. The bias was subtle, but it was there. In his experience, the people who owned $50 million jets wore suits, not streetwear. The woman crying in the flight attendant uniform looked the part of the victim. The teenager in the hoodie looked like the aggressor. "Miss, I need to see your ID," Higgins said to Jasmine, ignoring Tobias. "She doesn't have ID," Patricia interjected quickly. "That's why I stopped her. She refused to show it." Jasmine slowly reached for her back pocket. "Slowly," Higgins warned, his hand twitching. Jasmine pulled out her Stanford University ID and her driver's license. She handed them to the officer. Higgins shone his flashlight on them. He looked at the name, Jasmine King. He looked at the address, Alpine, New Jersey, one of the wealthiest zip codes in America. He paused. He looked back at Tobias. The man's suit was indeed a Brioni. The watch on his wrist was a Patek Philippe. Higgins felt the first prickle of doubt. "Okay," Higgins said, handing the ID back. "Mr. King, you say this is your plane. Do you have proof of ownership?" "My lawyer is sending the registration to your station chief as we speak," Tobias said coldly. "But the issue isn't ownership. The issue is that this woman is filing a false police report, and I intend to press charges for defamation." "It's not false," Patricia insisted, realizing she was losing the officer. She grabbed Miller's arm. "Captain, tell him how she grabbed me." Miller looked at the officer. Then he looked at Tobias King, whose eyes were boring into him like lasers. Miller was a coward, but he was also a man who realized that lying to a police officer was a felony, whereas getting fired was just a career setback. "Captain," Patricia hissed, "tell him." Miller swallowed hard. I didn't see her push you, Patricia." "What?" Patricia gasped. I was in the cockpit," Miller stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I heard shouting. I came out. The girl was on the stairs, but I didn't see physical contact initiated by her." "You traitor!" Patricia screamed, turning on her co-worker. "You were right there. You told me to call the police." "I told you to call security to escort them off," Miller argued. "I didn't say lie about assault." "Okay, enough," Higgins shouted, holding up his hands. "It's a he said, she said situation, and since nobody is bleeding, I suggest we all take a breath. Ma'am, if you want to file a formal complaint, you'll need to come down to the station. But I'm warning you, if I find out you're wasting police resources because of an employment dispute, you're going to be the one in a cell." Patricia's face went pale. She had gambled everything on the hope that the police would blindly side with the respectable flight crew over the thug teenager. She hadn't counted on Miller folding, but she wasn't done. She had one card left, a card born of pure spite. "Fine," Patricia spat. "Maybe I can't prove the assault, but I know for a fact that this aircraft is not cleared for departure. I revoked the flight plan before we left the cockpit." She smiled a wicked, jagged smile. "If they try to take off," Patricia told the officer. "They are violating FAA regulations. You have to ground the plane." Officer Higgins looked at Tobias. "Is that true, sir? Do you have a flight plan?" Tobias looked at the empty cockpit. He had a plane. He had a destination. But without a filed flight plan and a pilot to file it, the G700 was just a very expensive paperweight. Patricia had effectively stranded them. "We will handle the flight plan," Tobias said stiffly. "Not without a pilot, you won't," Patricia laughed. "And good luck finding a Gulfstream-rated crew at 6:12 p.m. on a Friday. You're stuck here, Your Highness. Enjoy the view of the Jersey Turnpike." She turned to get back into the police car, looking triumphant. She might have lost her job, but she had ruined their night. She had exerted power over the powerful. That was when a rumble was heard in the distance. Not the rumble of a jet engine, but the throaty roar of a vintage motorcycle. A beat-up Harley-Davidson swept around the corner of the hangar, the rider wearing a leather jacket and a helmet with flames painted on the side. The bike skidded to a halt right next to the police cruiser. The rider kicked the kickstand down and pulled off the helmet. It was a man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair, a rugged beard, and eyes that twinkled with mischief. "Uncle David!" Jasmine shouted, waving. David grinned, hopping off the bike. He looked at the police, the crying flight attendant, the sweating captain, and his brother-in-law Tobias. "Tobias," David nodded. "You always did know how to throw a party." Jasmine called, said you had a $40 million bird with no one to fly it. $50 million, Tobias corrected, a small smile finally breaking through. "And yes, we have a vacancy." David looked at the G700. He whistled low. "She's a beauty. Pearl 700 engines? Nice." Patricia rolled her eyes. "Who is this? Another mechanic? You can't just fly a G700 because you ride a motorcycle." David looked at Patricia. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. He unzipped his leather jacket. Underneath, he wasn't wearing a t-shirt. He was wearing a pristine white pilot's shirt with 4 gold bars on the epaulets. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a headset and a lanyard. "Actually, Ma'am," David said, his voice smooth as bourbon, "I'm a senior Czech airman for Gulfstream Aerospace. I spent the last 3 years teaching pilots how to fly this specific aircraft. In fact," David squinted at Captain Miller. "Miller? Is that you?" Miller's eyes went wide. He looked like he had seen a ghost. "Instructor David? Oh no." "You know him?" Patricia asked, panicked. He failed me on my first type-rating exam," Miller whispered. "He's the toughest examiner on the East Coast." David laughed. "I failed you because you didn't check your blind spots, Miller. Seems like you still have that problem." The arrival of Uncle David changed the energy on the tarmac instantly. The authority shifted from the badge of Officer Higgins to the 4 stripes on David's shoulders. In the world of aviation, the Czech airman was God. "Officer Higgins, is it?" David asked, extending a hand. "I believe I can clear up this flight plan issue. As a certified instructor and captain, I can file a new flight plan electronically in about 5 minutes. We have priority clearance." "And the assault?" Higgins asked, glancing back at Patricia. "She's pretty adamant." David looked at the G700. He pointed to a small, dark sphere embedded in the fuselage near the entry door. It was sleek, barely noticeable against the white paint. "Tobias?" David said. "Did you spring for the sentient security package on this jet?" Tobias nodded. "Top of the line. Why?" "Because," David grinned, looking at Patricia. "That little bubble right there isn't just a sensor. It's a 4K wide-angle camera with audio capability. It records everything that happens on the airstairs for liability purposes. It uploads directly to the cloud." The color drained from Patricia's face so fast she looked like a corpse. "No," she whispered. Those aren't always on. Motion activated, David said. And since you were blocking the door, you were definitely moving. Tobias pulled out his phone. Let's take a look, shall we? He opened the manufacturer's app. He tapped a few buttons. A video file loaded. Tobias turned the screen so Officer Higgins could see. The video was crystal clear. It showed Jasmine walking up the stairs. It showed Patricia blocking her. It showed the sneer, the aggressive body language. And then the audio played. You don't belong on a $60 million aircraft. Get off the stairs before I call security and have you dragged off. Then came the moment. Jasmine reached for her phone. Patricia's hand lashed out. A sharp crack echoed from the phone speaker as she slapped Jasmine's hand. You are not a passenger. You are a trespasser. Higgins watched the video in silence. He watched it twice. He looked up at Patricia. His expression was no longer weary. It was hard. Mom, Higgins said, reaching for his handcuffs. You told me she lunged at you. You told me she pushed you. You told me she was the aggressor. I was scared, Patricia sobbed, backing away. I didn't mean... Filing a false police report is a crime, Higgins said, spinning her around and clicking the cuffs onto her wrists. Assault is also a crime, and since this is an airport, lying about a security threat is a federal offense. You're not going home, Mom. You're coming to the precinct. Patricia began to scream. It was a raw, ugly sound. She begged Miller to help her, but Miller was busy staring at his shoes, trying to make himself invisible. Captain Miller, Tobias said. Miller looked up, trembling. You're free to go, Tobias said, but I will be sending this video to the FAA. I imagine they'll have questions about your judgment. I doubt you'll be flying anything bigger than a kite for a long time. Miller nodded, defeated. He grabbed his bag and walked away into the darkness, a broken man. Officer Higgins guided a weeping Patricia into the back of the cruiser. He paused before getting into the driver's seat and looked at Jasmine. Miss King, Higgins said, tipping his cap. I apologize for the assumption. You have a good flight. Thank you, officer, Jasmine said, her voice steady. The police car drove away, lights flashing, taking the toxicity with it. Silence returned to Teterboro. Well, David clapped his hands together. That was dramatic. Are we going to Palo Alto, or are we just going to stand here and admire the paint job? Tobias put his arm around Jasmine. We're going to Palo Alto. I think we need a vacation. I'll do the pre-flight, David said, bounding up the stairs 2 at a time. Jasmine, you want right seat? I could use a co-pilot. Jasmine's eyes lit up. Really? Dad, can I? Tobias laughed. It's your plane, kiddo. Just don't do any barrel rolls. They boarded the aircraft. The interior was stunning. Cream leather, walnut wood, gold accents. But as Jasmine walked into the cabin, she stopped. Sitting on the galley counter was a silver tray. On it was a plate of filet mignon, the garnish slightly wilted, just as Patricia had complained about. Jasmine picked up the plate. She walked to the trash compactor and dumped it in. I'm ordering pizza, Jasmine announced. Pizza? Tobias asked, settling into one of the captain's chairs. Yeah, Jasmine smiled, pulling out her phone. Delivery to the tarmac, and this time I'm going down to meet the driver myself, so nobody yells at him. 20 minutes later, the G700 was taxiing down the runway. Uncle David was in the pilot's seat. Jasmine was in the co-pilot's seat, monitoring the radios, not flying. And Tobias was in the back, eating a slice of pepperoni pizza and drinking a diet soda. As the jets roared to life, pushing them back into the seat, Jasmine looked out the window. She saw the lights of New Jersey fading below them. She saw the police station in the distance where Patricia was currently being processed. She felt a sense of justice. not just because she had won, but because the truth had won. But the story wasn't quite over. Because in the world of the elite, humiliation doesn't just disappear, it festers. And as the G700 climbed to 45,000 feet, cruising smoothly toward California, Tobias King opened his laptop. He had one more email to write, an email that would ensure that what happened today would become a lesson for the entire industry. The flight to Palo Alto was smooth, but down on the ground, a hurricane was tearing through the private aviation industry. While Jasmine slept in the converted lie-flat bed of the G700, worn out from the adrenaline dump of the afternoon, Tobias King was wide awake. He was connected to the aircraft's high-speed K-band Wi-Fi, and he was methodically dismantling the reputation of Apex Charter Solutions. He didn't rant on Twitter. He didn't post a reaction video. Tobias operated at a level far above social media influence. He operated in the boardroom. He drafted a formal memorandum. It was addressed to the Vendor Standards Committee of the 3 largest corporate travel conglomerates in the world, companies that managed travel for everyone, from Apple executives to visiting diplomats. Subject: immediate termination of service with Apex Charter Solutions due to gross security and safety violations. He attached the video file. By the time the G700 touched down in California, the email had been opened by 25 key decision-makers. The fallout was nuclear, the fate of the company. Within 48 hours, Apex Charter Solutions lost 3 major corporate contracts, totaling $12 million annually. But the death blow came from the safety auditors. Because the incident involved an assault on a passenger and a false police report filed by a crew member on the tarmac, the prestigious Argus Platinum rating, the gold standard for charter safety, was suspended pending an investigation. Without that rating, Apex couldn't insure their flights for high-net-worth individuals. Their stock value plummeted 18% in a single week. Robert Vance, the CEO who had tried to smooth things over, was forced to step down by his board of directors for failure to maintain crew standards. The fate of Captain Miller. Captain Miller thought he had escaped with just a firing. He was wrong. The FAA takes interference with crew members seriously, but they take crew misconduct endangering safety even more seriously. Tobias King forwarded the video to the local Flight Standards District Office, FSDO. The investigation revealed that Miller had failed to check the manifest and had allowed a hostile environment to escalate on the airstairs, compromising the security of the aircraft. His airline transport pilot, ATP certificate, was suspended for 90 days. When he finally got his license back, no reputable charter company would touch him. The last anyone heard, Miller was flying a rusted, single-engine prop plane for a skydiving school in rural Ohio, dropping tourists into cornfields for $15 an hour. He spent his days cleaning vomit out of the back of a Cessna 182, a far cry from the air-conditioned cockpit of a Gulf Stream. The fate of Patricia's karma was the most severe and the most public. The video footage didn't just stay in Tobias's inbox. During the discovery phase of the legal proceedings, the footage became public record. It leaked to the press. The clip of her sneering, "You don't belong on a $60 million aircraft," followed by her slapping Jasmine's hand, went viral. It was played on every morning news show in America, under the headline, "Air Rage, Flight Attendant Profiles Tech Heiress." Patricia pled guilty to filing a false police report to avoid jail time. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation and 400 hours of community service. But the real punishment was the cider ban. Because she had a criminal record involving an incident at an airport, the Department of Homeland Security revoked her SIDA, Security Identification Display Area, badge eligibility. This meant Patricia could never work at an airport again. Not as a flight attendant, not as a gate agent, Not even selling magazines at a terminal newsstand. She was effectively exiled from the only industry she had ever known. She ended up working night shifts at a toll booth on the Garden State Parkway. Every time a luxury car rolled through her lane, she had to force a smile and take their money. Watching them drive off toward the airport she was banned from entering. The final victory. A month later, Jasmine was back at Stanford. She was sitting in a coffee shop, wearing the same grey hoodie she had worn that day on the tarmac. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her dad. "Dad, just bought a new company. They needed a logistics overhaul. Ironically, it's the parent company that owns Apex. I'm thinking of renaming it. Any ideas?" Jasmine smiled. She typed back, "Jasmine, Open Door Aviation." "Dad, perfect." She put her phone down and took a sip of her coffee. She looked around the shop. Nobody knew who she was. Nobody knew she was the daughter of the man who had just bought a charter airline just to fix its culture. To them, she was just a student in a hoodie. And that was exactly how she liked it. She didn't need a uniform to know her worth, and that is the story of how one arrogant mistake cost a flight crew everything. It's a powerful reminder that respect shouldn't be a currency we trade based on someone's appearance or clothes. Patricia and Captain Miller judged Jasmine based on a hoodie and a stereotype, never realizing that the powerless teenager they were mocking held the keys to their entire careers. They learned the hard way that true power doesn't need to shout, and it doesn't need to wear a uniform. It just needs to stand its ground. What would you have done if you were in Jasmine's shoes? Would you have kept your cool like she did, or would you have snapped? And have you ever been judged by how you were dressed? I want to hear your stories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who needs a reminder to be kind, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss our next dramatic story. Thanks for watching.